Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. All right, so coming back after a week off, we need time off as well these days, just to refresh and recharge. But the last time we spoke, we were talking about the Facebook metaverse and, maybe having a chuckle or two about that. But shortly thereafter, Microsoft announced its version of the metaverse. And just straight off the bat, when I was just listening to some of what they were announcing, I just thought it's so very Microsoft. It was like almost the exact opposite vibe of what Facebook was doing, which was kind of, to me, a little bit more creepy and maybe unwelcome in the sense that it's like a 3D Facebook. Microsoft takes the boring route, if you want to call it that, where it's like, oh, it's built into Teams. It's part of Microsoft 365 for business customers. And yeah, they threw in avatars during team meetings as an example and all of that. But I guess it's an example of what I actually thought would probably be maybe a little bit more reasonable from a company that was more likely to expect to create a metaverse if that was going to be a thing, if that made sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Look, with Microsoft, I think the one thing where they will get traction with their avatars is that, there's this idea in the business world, you trust Microsoft because we're all using Microsoft Office and Teams and whatever else. So they've certainly got a huge market advantage. But I think the use cases are very different. I think as Facebook has already sort of determined the way you would enter the Facebook metaverse and interact in there is more around real experience, whereas Microsoft Office is really more about putting an avatar of yourself up while you do some emails or look at something on another screen, I'm sure. But it is interesting, that Facebook still seems to think that it has, business opportunities. And I just think Windows and Office have been with us for so long. That's a huge ask to think that people are going to want to shift away from, your 2D avatar that everyone feels good at, putting their introverted or extroverted avatar up in Teams, as opposed to entering alternate reality or virtualized Office and sitting down and talking businesses.
It's a little bit different, shall we say.
I like the idea, but I think it's just a little bit too far ahead of its time at the moment anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, there were some virtues in what Microsoft was announcing in the sense that there was this acknowledgement that during the pandemic with so many video meetings that you just become fatigued staring at a screen for hours on end. Particularly, I had one, it was one afternoon the other week, I had 5 half-hour meetings in a row. Now, I almost wonder if just 1 2.5 hour meeting might have been better, because if you have 5 half-hour meetings, you haven't got a break between them, and you also have to restart again at the beginning of each meeting with a new burst of energy because you're talking to a new group of people. And it can actually be quite tiring when you're just staring at a screen for that long, as opposed to actually having that literal interaction with them in person. So the idea of, flicking on an avatar when you're starting to get fatigued and, that the avatar can express itself for you and all that sort of thing was kind of an interesting concept in that respect.
Yeah, it is interesting because, okay, if people are fatigued and you're suggesting I'm putting an avatar up to stop my fatigue, that instantly suggests to me that I'm doing something else behind that avatar. I don't actually understand the rationale. I'm sure maybe I'm just missing the point, but to me, I'll be browsing a news site while my avatar's nodding.
Well, that's the flip side of it, is that it could almost seem like a brush off and impolite, if other people leave their cameras on while they're having the meeting, kind of thing.
Well, I think that where this will go is the same way as texting, effectively, where nobody calls anyone up anymore. or, people would rather send an email or a text,
Yeah.
rather than, and I think that this will be a very natural progression. Everyone will have an avatar and that'll become standard.
Yeah.
And then basically from there, everyone will be doing something else while the avatar's nodding at the boss while he tells them about a new initiative.
Absolutely. Well, perhaps if we use that to transition into what was going to be our main topic, which is about introversion and extroversion, we can start there. Actually, is that you can imagine maybe the introverts of the world might actually like this because the social interaction is what is draining for an introvert, even if it is over a video screen. So having an avatar, do it for you might actually be a way to, save some energy or something, and just take the pressure off of having to interact the whole time that you're in a meeting. But having said that, I still wonder what you can still just switch your camera off. And achieve the same thing, like you're just on a conference call or something. So
yeah, but sometimes people expect that level of interaction that you've put out there. Now, look, for introverts, I think almost certainly you go to an avatar, and where you can tell the introverts straight away in a sort of, I guess, a much larger meeting where you might have 20 or 30 people, because the introverts don't put on their camera and then pretend they don't have a very stable internet connection, and that's why. But because really, if you've got nothing to contribute at a meeting, all you're going to do is sit there and nod anyway. I think, Zoom really plays into the hands of the introverted, extroverted personalities, in that extroverted personalities probably will dominate in Zoom. They dominate, obviously, quite often in social settings as well. But I don't think extroverts get a return on their extroversion as well through video conferencing, whereas for introverts, you get a much higher return because you can turn off your camera or you can just put up an avatar that just nods for 45 minutes.
Well, it's an interesting way to look at it. And I just find it, the technology, and I guess we can talk about how the pandemic's impacted this as well, but the technology has kind of allowed for communication methods to shake up those sort of dynamics on what's available for introverts and extroverts or whatever. The traditional model being that if an introvert goes to a party, it's like they're having to spend their energy capital going there and interacting, and then they're poor at the end, whereas the extrovert goes to the party poor and makes huge gains at the party, and they feel like they're on cloud 9 at the end. And that is in terms of actual in-person interaction when you're talking, and that's kind of the traditional model. But now we've got like this other sort of component taking place where we've had a pandemic. There's been a huge reliance on having to rely on all these tech tools to communicate and get work done. It now looks like that this is going to become a feature of work. The pandemic has probably accelerated this by 5-10 years. Like, we might have ended up there eventually anyway, but it's now brought it forward. So if anything, I would think that it would actually be a help to introverts as well, that you've got all of these communication methods that provide a little bit more of a barrier to spending that energy capital that I was talking about before. On the flip side, in terms of extroverts, I don't see extroverts enjoying sitting at home, web conferencing all day. So they're still going to need to go out. They're the ones that are still going to need to go into the office. They're the ones that are going to, get everyone out for Friday night drinks or whatever. and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wonder if if you think about all of that together, all of the dynamics of it, that you can potentially get workplaces that don't have to have everyone in all the time. So you get smaller workplaces, smaller tenancies, smaller offices, and then you just think of the whole ramifications of all of that on how many buildings do you need in a CBD now, and all that sort of thing, and also just the dispersal of geographical location. If you're introverted and you get a job that you can work entirely off your laptop at your home, you can probably be 2 hours out of the CBD and live there and never have to leave.
And that's right, and I think that's probably what's miscommunicated when a lot of employers have concerns about the work from home routine is that for introverts, it's really easy to get lost from the fabric of the organisation. And I think people have to realise that it's not just enough to do your job, you have to socially interact. And I think there's a danger, the more introverted you are, the more prone you are to excluding yourself from any additional effort. So it's very interesting. Whether or not avatars become a thing will become, I think really centre around practice and protocol, and whether or not people, allow it, because effectively, to me, putting an avatar up would mean you're not listening. It's no different to somebody checking their emails during a meeting in person. So, it's an interesting sort of idea, and they're very closely linked, these two topics. But I do wonder how it'll play out.
Indeed. I just the other thing, I guess, just to finish up, is just that sort of whole general discussion of introverts versus extroverts as well, in the sense that, it's an age-old kind of topic, and has been, I think, in some ways misunderstood. It'd be easy to say that an introvert is shy, but no, not necessarily. I was reading the other day that, if you take a famous example, someone like Richard Branson is apparently an introvert. You can't say the man's shy, but he's still, maybe in that sort of social context, he still finds it not as, that sort of, that it's an energy drain for him to do that sort of thing. But if he goes out and he's excited about launching, his latest Virgin Galactic ship or something, he's like larger than life kind of thing. And similar in reverse to that is the idea that if, all extroverts are confident, that is not that isn't the case. They're not necessarily all outgoing, all confident. It's just that it's more about the energy level, etc., in terms of what you get out of a social interaction. And I just find that that's a lot of that's interesting, because I feel like regardless of how long this topic has been around, that continually is misunderstood. An example, of course, too, even if, like for myself, is that a lot of people at work, particularly after going into a more managerial role, have just automatically assumed that I'm an extrovert, because, I speak up, at meetings, I seem to know what to say in certain situations or whatever, but that just comes from experience in the job and doing all that sort of stuff. But I'm actually an introvert by nature, and I just find that that's really interesting in terms of what people understand these concepts to be.
Well, that's right, and I think an important part of functioning as part of a team is understanding where you sit on that scale. And for people to appreciate that everyone has a different approach. And as you've said, extroverts can be quite shy, and introverts can even be quite outgoing. There's not necessarily a certain typecast, but I think the great leveler is, the video tool, and work from home. And you'll see that the introverts would work from home 5 days a week. Extroverts would, tend to want to come in more. So it's very interesting. I think, there are a lot of things about the COVID situation and what's happened with work over the last 12 to 18 months that probably haven't been recognised yet, but in the next couple of years, and certainly with the arrival of avatars, will.
Indeed. All right, we might wrap it up there, Steve. Interesting times. I'm actually, just from the work front, just kind of interested to see where all of this actually goes in terms of working from home, etc. So it should be interesting to see how it plays out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right. So that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.